Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us so bright and early here. And 20 years of these awards is an impressive milestone in and of itself because it's 20 years of recognizing Oregonians and community organizations and folks around the state doing tremendous work. So I want to thank our folks here at State Lands for all their hard work and putting these awards together. So thank you. This is an annual celebration of people and projects who help Oregon's wetlands, waters, and lands thrive, which is who we are as Oregonians. Since the awards were established in 2004, the Land Board has presented more than 45 awards, recognizing exceptional efforts in every region of Oregon. This year, we're celebrating not only our recipients, but also the 20th anniversary of the State Land Board Awards. Year after year, these awards highlight how collaboration and innovation benefits Oregon's natural resources and inspires stewardship. Today's honorees are now part of that remarkable legacy. So congratulations for being part of that. And we have several awards, and my colleague on the Land Board, Secretary of State Lavon Griffin-Valade, will present the first award.
Howdy, everybody. How are you this morning?
Wake up, Aaron.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Governor Kotek. It's my pleasure to present the first award to one of two stream projects we're honoring today. This award goes to a project that created opportunity from a challenge, replacing a 112-year-old wooden pipeline. Can you imagine a wooden pipeline? Anyway, wooden pipeline that supplied more than half of the Dalles' annual water supply. The project site in Mount Hood National Forest came with extraordinary challenges that required creative new solutions to ensure fish passage and habitat. Beyond care for aquatic species, the project also restored a historic cabin and built a new trailhead for the mountain bike community. Yay, mountain bike community. Beyond care for aquatic species, the project, whoops, I'm repeating myself in case you didn't hear the part about the mountain bike trail. Partners on this project included public, private, and nonprofit groups in a true collaborative effort. There they are on the screen, and I'm gesturing to the screen. Please join me in congratulating the 2024 Land Board Stream Award winner, the Dalles Dog River Pipeline Replacement.
One of these here things.
Where would you want? Where's the photo going? Where are we going?
Where do you want us? Okay.
Okay.
You told that. Come in. Not sure it's fine.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Secretary, and congratulations again to the Dog River Pipeline Replacement Team. A very impressive story. Our second stream award goes to a river restoration project in an area of Eastern Oregon that is a top priority for the Walla Walla Basin Watershed Council. That's tough to say, by the way. So if I mess that up, it's a lot of W's in a row. And the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. This project took multiple actions, reestablishing ground and surface water interaction, protecting spring wetlands and rerouting surface springs, as well as planting thousands of trees and relocating exposed channels into forested locations. This number is impressive to me. 21 different partners and key landowners came together to make the project possible. And that is a list worth reviewing as well. That might also show up at some point here. If those of you who can see the screen, some of you are a little hard back there, but there's a very impressive list on the screen too. And all of you deserve congratulations and credit. So let's congratulate the 2024 Land Board Stream Award winner, the North Fork Walla Walla River Restoration. You get a photo here. Yeah, well done. Okay, back to the same spot. Know where we're going now.
There you go. Yes. Thank you, Treasurer Reed and Secretary Griffin-Villate, and congratulations to the North Fork Walla Walla River Restoration. We were talking a little bit here in the reception area about, I think many of these projects and the things that you have all worked on, it takes the right people, the right moment, the right resources that come together to make these projects happen. And it's pretty awesome to watch. 21 partners in that project alone. Yeah, that's not shabby. That's pretty incredible. That's what it takes to get it done, right? And so congratulations on that. Because we're recognizing partnerships today because here in Oregon, that's how we get stuff done. And I often tell governors in other states when that's, well, how did you do that? It's like, well, we brought this group together and that group and this person. They're like, wow, that's how we do things here in Oregon. I now have the honor of presenting 2 awards that specifically recognize the people and groups who have advanced the Department of State Lands work through partnership. So I'm going to start with the Catalyst Award. The Catalyst Award annually recognizes a person whose individual actions light the way to a better Oregon. In the southern Willamette Valley, there's an ecologically important wetland known as Quamash Prairie. Once a degraded agricultural floodplain, this restored wetland is fortunate to be under the care of Chad Hoffman of the Lane County Public Works Department, who, by the way, loves his job. Not only is Mr. Hoffman doing an amazing job with seed collection and proliferation of desirable natives, he is also extending his care to the wider community. Chad brings student groups to the Quamash Prairie on a weekly basis, fostering community involvement and stewardship starting at a young age. So I wish you would join me in congratulating the 2024 Land Board Catalyst Award winner, Mr. Chad Hoffman. Our final award this morning is the Partnership Award. Not that you aren't all doing partnership work, but this award is special this year for 2 reasons. First, we are recognizing 14 community and agency partners, which is a record for these awards. And second, we thought the award we gave these partners needed to reflect how their work contributes to Oregon. The Land Board oversees 620,000 acres of school rangeland, mostly arid, high desert with grasses and shrubs. Caring for those rangelands often includes the management of juniper. I've learned a lot about juniper over the years. Juniper is a native tree, once kept in check by fire, that is now overtaking rangelands in our state. A single established juniper can consume more than 35 gallons of water a day. Very thirsty trees. We are always looking for new economic uses for juniper. So DSL worked with 2 small businesses in Central Oregon to make these awards out of juniper. The awards that we have today are useful use of the juniper. So they are where I need, there's one. I'll hold this up. You can see how beautiful this is. So we're excited about the awards themselves. And it's a fitting recognition for the community and agency partners who help the department manage the rangelands that generate revenue for Oregon's K-12 schools. So I'm going to read off all the partners who are part of this year's Partnership Award. We have the Harney Soil and Water Conservation District, the Crook County Soil and Water Conservation District, Malheur County Weed Control, Malheur County Soil and Water Conservation District, Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District, Jordan Valley Cooperative Weed Management Area, Harney Cooperative Weed Management Area, Harney County Weed Control, Ida Desert Partnership, Pheasants Forever, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and the Oahe Watershed Council, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and SageCon. Let's give a round of applause for all those folks. These are folks who are getting it done in very wide open spaces in our state. So Rangeland Partners, please come up and join me for your award. These partners help with so many things, applying for grants, working with lessees, acting as contract administrators, accepting federal funding, and coordinating large projects with multiple partners and landowners. So join me in congratulating the 2024 Land Board Partnership Award winners. They're also on the screen. Thank you.
Everyone holding their awards?
Yeah, and let's grab, can we get everybody, so everybody can have their,
Grab your awards.
get your juniper chunks. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
One for each group, yes. Okay, people with the chunks in the front. I will stand with you.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a more technical word for that, but I'm.
Slices.
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 Okay. You need it.
Yeah.
Closer.
Okay.
All right. Like,
Smash.
There you go. No, you don't get that.
So we take it in eight.
Okay, you gotta be.
The side.
Oh, yeah, come on, there you go. There you go. There we go.
You got this.
You got that,
You got this. Here, let me hold that. You got it.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna do a quick video.
All right, everybody, yay, Rangeland. I want some Rocky moments. So congratulations and thank you for stepping up for the state and making that happen. So, and with that, I think I just want to thank again all of our Land Board Award recipients. Thank you for everyone who joined us this morning. We have friends and family here. These exceptional projects and partnerships make stuff happen here in Oregon, and I know every one of us on the Land Board is so proud to be part of it with you. So thank you very much. And now I think we have to rearrange the room. Morning, everyone. Nice firm wrap. We'll call to order the October 15th, 2024 State Land Board meeting. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here in person and online. We have several action items today, but we had a wonderful start to our day with the State Land Board Awards. So appreciate again everyone who came and were recognized for their great work, and hope folks could catch some of that online as well. We are going to start off with item number 1, which is a consent item to approval of the minutes from our August meeting. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the August meeting minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Madam Secretary. We have a motion and a second. Are there any objections to the minutes from our August meeting? Any changes? Seeing none, minutes are approved. We will now move on to our action items. Actually, I'm going to take us out of order. We have several action items, but I also know we have some folks here for an informational that have some time constraints. So I'm going to move us to item number 5 on the agenda, which is our first informational item on geologic carbon sequestration, with a presentation from the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. So I'll give everybody a second to move to tab number 5, and then we will come back to our action items related to the Elliott and our asset management plan. After that, I will keep an eye on the clock, but I think we'll all find this an interesting presentation. So moving on to item number 5, and we'll start off with Director Walker for an intro.
Thank you, Governor and members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you again today. Over the past year, the Department of State Lands has been exploring opportunities for concurrently expanding and diversifying revenue while contributing to those wonderful climate goals that we care about, and particularly in the area of carbon sequestration. So you heard from me in Charleston when we had our meeting there at the South Slough. I just gave you a brief memo, but today I have the real thing. Dr. Rory DeSterrett, he's the state geologist and Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, otherwise known as DOGAMI, executive director. And he's going to provide you that scientific overview that I'm very weak in, but beginning to understand. And all I know is I just think it's really exciting. So I'm going to turn it over to Rory, and we have some slides for you.
Thank you. Good morning, Governor, Secretary of State, Treasurer. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss geologic carbon sequestration. Rather hard
Just
to
announce yourself for the record.
sorry, for the record, Rory DeSterrett, State Geologist and Director of DOGAMI. What we're going to discuss today is the center of national media conversation. You can see that in National Geographic, on 60 Minutes, and other national and international news services. What we're going to do is go through an overview of why on geologic carbon sequestration, and then drill down into opportunities in Oregon.
And I'm sorry you can't see the slides because that screen's not working today.
That screen is
But
not
it
working.
is on behind you, so fortunately you have your little cheat sheet.
So slide 2, please. Yeah. So I'd like to discuss.
One moment. Thank you. 1 second. I know that's hard for folks who are here, and people want to move their chairs around so they don't have to careen their necks. Because I'm sorry, it's not on the screen. So I'm just giving everybody a second. If you can't see the screen and need to change a seat or turn your chair. Some people are behind it. So everybody good? Okay.
Not sure why that's not working today, but
Yeah, that makes it a little hard. Because you got some great slides. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin with a discussion of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change consensus models. These describe pathways to limit warming to 1.5 degrees C, as we have signed up for in the Paris Climate Accord, and that is the green line, and I recognize that's hard to see from here. And each of these scenarios brings in different elements at different rates, but the colors are meaningful here. So the brown is natural climate solutions, what we are already doing in Oregon. The yellow is bioenergy with carbon capture, not part of this conversation today. And the gray area is both emissions reductions on the books already, and geologic carbon sequestration. And you see that that gray wedge is the most significant driver towards all of these pathways. If you could go to the next slide, please. What you should also take away from these slides is that we are limited by rate, approximately 2 gigatons of CO2 per year. And I apologize for not introducing those axes, that it's time and billions of tons of CO2 or gigatons. So we are limited by rate. And it extends from there that if we wait a year, it takes 2 years to catch up because we have concomitant new emissions while also sequestering existing. If you go to the next slide. And this reaches to a point where, unfortunately, policies that have been enacted globally don't get us to where we need to go. That is according to the IPCC. So the delta on that green line, sorry, the blue line and the red line there is quite significant. So it's time for action now. And there is an opportunity in Northeast Oregon. So if you can go to the next slide. This is a landscape or a cartoon of a landscape that I hope you recognize. It's depicting Northeast Oregon and Southern Washington. On that landscape are energy transition elements that we should be familiar with, wind and solar. And then also on that surface, we have depictions of capture or carbon capture from a point source and direct air capture. Also shown in this cartoon is the potable water zone, which is the blue line. And then there is a steel pipe into the ground that goes to much significantly greater depths than the potable water zone. And CO2 is injected into porous basalt, and then it is sealed by less permeable units. There have been 2 demonstration projects, one locally at Wallula Gap in Washington, where the Pacific Northwest National Lab did an experiment about 15 years ago and demonstrated that you could mineralize CO2 in basalt. And there is currently a demonstration project in Iceland where the same process is being demonstrated. Next slide, please. Northeast Oregon has a significant amount of salt in the Columbia River basalt, and it is underlays a significant amount of state land. Dogami and DSL are currently working to understand which of those parcels of land is optimum, and that is an action we're moving forward with. Next slide, please. I'd like to start discussing what is already happening in Oregon. There are a number of projects that have been funded by the US Department of Energy. So the University of Wyoming has a project near Hermiston. The Rocky Mountain Institute, which is a climate nonprofit, is exploring a direct air capture hub in the region. A consortium of groups led by Carbon Solutions, including Dogami, has a project to look at regional technical partnership, and there is a significant amount of outreach and engagement written into that award. Imminently, there will be a proposal or a funding announcement from the from the US Department of Energy. It's called Carbon Basin Assessment, Storage and Evaluation. And as some of you are aware, there is already a direct air capture facility being constructed in the Dalles. Next slide, please. So Oregon is not a massive emitter of CO2 in comparison with other states and territories. I haven't shown the transportation sector here, but you can go to the DEQ website and find that information. What I have done is I've looked at point source emissions from our industrial base. This is a moderate amount of CO2, which we could, in theory, capture and sequester in Oregon with some ease. Those are point source emissions, and you see where they are. They concentrate around our urban centers and our industrial heartland. On the right is a schematic of a direct air capture facility. I won't go into the chemistry of this, but essentially you have a chemical filter that plucks CO2 out of the atmosphere. When that filter is saturated, a small amount of energy is applied, and then that CO2 is driven off the filter and is then captured. Here in this diagram, it's showing it to go to a variety of industrial processes, but in theory, you could sequester that in the subsurface. Next slide, please. So as I say, some of these actions around carbon sequestration are already here. The entity and the DAOs, and this is from media, have signed off-take agreements that are significant. This also represents an opportunity for the state. Royalties on surface rights and pore space on state lands, for example, and facility siting and leasing again. The state also has a decarbonisation strategy, which essentially means we want to divest from certain elements of fossil fuels, and this could be a vehicle for state investment. And then, of course, there's economic development in non-agricultural sectors, and of course, it just gets to what we want to do with regard to climate change. Next slide, please. So I want to show a couple of quick slides on a demonstration project from Iceland. This is the Climeworks and Carbfix facility. This is the capture on the left, and then mineralization on the right. And if you go to the next slide, the second phase of this is a significantly bigger facility. It's about the size of a data center at this time. And what I also want you to take from this slide is the amount of federal investment that is being pushed towards this technology. Next slide, please. As I begin to wrap up here, I'd like to just say that there are a number of CO2 projects occurring nationally already. Those are occurring in North Dakota and Illinois. There are 143 permit applications for what is called Class 6 well of underground injection control. And so it's happening nationally, and a number of states have primacy to regulate on their own. That's North Dakota, Wyoming, and Louisiana, and a number of other states are interested. Dorgami is working with DEQ to understand the regulatory framework in Oregon. At the moment, regulation for this class of well resides with the US EPA. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to finish and leave this slide up. To advance this opportunity in Northeast Oregon, we essentially need some data. We need to understand the geology and the subsurface in a way that we haven't before. And so that is the number one driver here. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. And before I open up, can we go back to the slide that was earlier, had the picture of the basalt with the carbon capture in it? Yeah, that one. Yeah. I geek out just a second since we have a geologist here. First of all, I think we have a lot of potential here and very interested in how we move forward with this conversation. The two things, my understanding from my reading, though limited, is that we have pretty strict guidelines from the EPA. So those wells bypass all the water levels, right?
Correct.
You go through, there's no connection with any of the water levels, correct?
There is absolutely no connection between potable water and where you would inject CO2. In fact, US EPA regulations are extremely stringent and define a total dissolved solid content, which is significantly higher than you could possibly drink, even for agriculture.
Okay, that is helpful. And even though we don't have our own regulatory structure, the US EPA has done a lot of work on coming up with it, even if we haven't seen a lot. What do we know research-wise from the basalt in Oregon? Like, we just have happier basalt? I mean, is that something we need to examine more?
Yes, we essentially need to understand where the flow zones are, meaning areas where you could inject CO2. We need to know that they're at a critical depth. The minimum depth of CO2 injection is about 3,500 feet in the Columbia Plateau. So we need to drill deeper than that to understand what's there. And can we get a CO2 plume to fill a volume that meets certain criteria?
Thank you. I think we have opportunities here. Questions? Yeah, Mr. Treasurer.
Madam Chair, two questions. One, building on what you just articulated, a lot to understand about how the drilling and testing would work. But can you refresh my memory? I think we've talked about this before, but in the description of how the US EPA has authority, I have a hazy memory of some of the states sort of asserting primacy or going through a process that takes on that authority. Can you refresh my memory about how one of you maybe how that works and where we are in consideration of that?
Some years, thank you for the question, Treasurer. Some years ago, US EPA wrote underground injection control class 6 regulations, which are specific only to carbon sequestration or carbon CO2 injection. Since then, a number of states have gone through a process that's led by the US EPA, described as primacy, where they have taken regulatory control away from EPA. Essentially, state regulations are the same or stricter than the EPA regulation. So those states are North Dakota, Wyoming, and Louisiana, and several other states have intimated their interest in seeking primacy. Also, tribal nations have also expressed interest too.
Essentially a state where a tribal nation says to US EPA, we're ready to go. We want to do this. We're going to be as strict or stricter, and the US EPA agrees potentially, and then the state is in control.
Correct. That process is relatively long process involving rule writing and so on. But yes,
I short circuited a lot in the description. Yes, but thank you. Second question. Like the governor, you're having an expert here is a nice thing. Thinking as you were describing point source and what exists in Oregon, I just want to make sure my understanding is correct. While that's interesting and important, I'm certainly not contradicting what you said, but is it also true that to a certain extent, it doesn't matter where it comes from if we have the opportunity and all the other things match up to capture and store, we'd be doing the world some good wherever it came from. Have I got that right?
Correct, Treasurer. Thank you. Yes. As I said, the amount of CO2 that Oregon is emitting is relatively small, but the volume of rock and pore space is many times that. So there's a net opportunity on the state side to essentially bring in CO2 as a way of mitigating climate change and generating a revenue from it.
The revenue appeals to me, but so does the imbalance in the carbon. When we were in the legislature, a lot of times the discussion was, well, Oregon's not contributing that much, but this might be an opportunity to do more than our share. So I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Madam Secretary, any questions?
Have any at this point? I'm interested in your map of Eastern Oregon and the locations. And do you have any feedback from the folks who live there?
So
That's a good segue into what we talk about
Yes.
next.
So thank you for the question, Secretary. As part of one of the funded awards from US Department of Energy, we have a significant amount of money for outreach. And so we are going to be boots on the ground in the community, communicating what the opportunity could be long before there's a material project. We have begun some of that work, but it needs to move forward much faster. But we have some funds to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
That I would say, Madam Secretary and members of the board, that also includes working with our tribal nations. And I understand Dogami has been out to the Umatilla tribe, but not a government to government visit, just a visit. And so that would definitely be high on the priority list. And we would develop a list of stakeholders that we would want to engage with. And both our agency and his agency would assist in that.
Have you, have you discussed this with the Burns Paiute? Because I think that your map looks like it might go that far.
At this moment, the area that we are looking at is to the north of the Burns Paiute, but I think our intent would be to speak to all tribes because it is a state issue.
Thank you.
When I think, thank you, Madam Secretary, the map when we look at emissions and locations for point source, that has a different opportunity than the direct air capture. But it's good to know that we have the potential geologic environment to be helpful here. And there's money coming from the federal government. I think from the standpoint of this board, I think some direction of continuing the due diligence, the outreach, the conversation of state lands, and there was a map there and you're still doing the inventory there. I think is important. Trying to figure out if we can pilot, but there's a lot of conversations to have. I mean, from my point of view, we should move forward with the conversations and come back in a future meeting and talk about progress there. I don't know, Mr. Treasurer, if you want to add anything to that.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to second and agree with your comment. It seems to me that this is one of those opportunities that will be slow until it's fast, and we want to be prepared to move quickly and have done all the work that's being described here to be ready when the technology is ready. We want to have a clear understanding of what is below the surface and what regulatory requirements are there, and a clear understanding of community impact, all that sort of stuff. And if we're not doing that ahead of time, we might miss that opportunity. So I appreciate what you said. I agree with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we have an opportunity here to start, having those conversations with resources flowing not only on the public sector, but this could be a private sector opportunity as well for investment. And I don't know if even the treasurer might have some ideas there, but I mean, we're seeing that with the one, direct or the site base that Google was involved in. We have to go here, right? We have to be participating. Plus, there is maximizing use of these lands in a responsible way to help, bring in what I think is responsible revenue if this actually meets all our goals in terms of the technology and the regulation. So,
Agreed.
so when would we come? When's a good timeline? I mean, I feel like 6 months. I mean, for a update on
An
when,
update, yeah.
or sooner,
Right. Well, I'd like to do it before I retire. And then after that, I'll hand it off to someone else. But my last land board meeting with you all is in June. So we could give you an update in June or before that. I also wanted Rory to talk about Water Resources is really interested in this project because it can tell us things. So do you want to share what it can tell us?
Thank you, Director Ward. Yes, as part of the regulations around UIC Class 6 wells, it's necessary to take water samples from a variety of depths, and so we will be drilling deeper potentially than we have done for water wells. So we will be gathering all that water information on the way down. So it's a value add to another agency as part of this project.
would be very helpful to know as well, for sure. Thank you for mentioning that. Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Madam Secretary?
I have one, which is about the Fossil Beds National Monument, and is that you're not encroaching on that at all?
Thank you for the question, Secretary of State. No, with that is further to the south than we anticipate being optimal for this. And so no, it should not be impacted in any way.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking at the map. Thank you for that question, Madam Secretary. Anything else, directors on this issue?
I just would say I'm pretty excited about working with Dogami on this project. We're going to drill. We're going to look a little closer at the properties that we have where we own both the surface and the subsurface, which is ideal because law is unsettled if you only own one. But we can do it. But we are going to look at what's the best potential and report back. We'll put together our game plan for outreach. We'll do that. And I can report back to you under another. I haven't done an other item in a long while, but just, somewhere along in the next couple of board meetings that we're moving along, and we'll have a bigger report for you in June kind of thing. And we're also looking to get permission from the legislature for his agency to be able to spend some money that we can invest as the department.
We do have a unique timeline as it relates to the session. So how about this? Let's make sure we have an update in December.
Okay.
And I think, where you are on your outreach plan and, because I think particularly if this is at all a resource conversation, whether it's federal funds or others in the session, it would be helpful to be able to have that. So the sooner we can have a framework of how we're going to approach this, I think it'll be helpful for us with legislators. So let's get an update in December.
All right. We're on it. Have you given a presentation to the legislature on this yet?
Not yet, no.
Just might find some time to do that in ledge days.
Well, thank you very much, Director. And with that, we will close the information item on geologic carbon sequestration potential in Oregon. Thank you. With that, we'll go back up to the top of the agenda to our action items.
Number 2.
We're on agenda item 2, Governor. Get to that.
Yeah, so we'll go back to item number 2. So items number 2 and 3 on our action agenda are related to the Elliott State Research Forest. Item number 2 is regard to additional appointments to the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors. And Director Walker?
Thank you. As you just stated, whether the land board should appoint the candidates presented by the department as the remaining 3 voting members of the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors. The authorities are set out below. I'll just refresh your memory that at your April land board meeting, you all adopted a formal oversight structure of the Elliott, and you can find that as Appendix B, and that that structure tells you how the board members will be appointed and what their terms will be. I do want to just briefly say that everyone eventually will be appointed to a 4-year term as the oversight structure indicates. However, if you go down in that section, you'll see that the first year of appointments are staggered so that we can stagger them eventually. So we have 3 folks serving 3-year terms, 2 folks serving 2-year terms, and 3 folks serving 2-year terms as well. We have 3 and 3. I counted that earlier and why I didn't see that. So it's 3 at 3 years, 3 at 2 years, and 3 at 1 year. And then we'll eventually get them all to a 4-year appointment. So the board can consist of 7 or 9 members, but I believe it was your intention at our April meeting to find 3 more and make it a 9-person board, which is great. So we we did some pretty extensive outreach, and we wanted to make sure that we had a full complement of relevant experience on the board and expertise. People who embrace the mission, first of all, needed to be able to embrace the mission of a research forest, the management policies and operations of the forest, and demonstrated interest in the success. So the list of candidates is in Appendix A. Let me just say we did tremendous amount of outreach from April through May, and also previously in 2022. I spent a couple hours the other day on a very nice warm day on my deck, going through all of the Elliott emails and information to see who all we had looked at and eventually appointed. And we had a lot of folks on that list. And we went back to it. We heard from people who wanted to be appointed. So we are presenting to you today 3 individuals that we would like to appoint. And Peyton Smith is the first one. She's born and raised in North Bend and spent her youth growing up on the Elliott, and is the Director of Communications and Government Affairs for Southport Lumber in Coos Bay. And you can read more about her bio in Appendix A. I'm going to hold Michael Wilson for a minute because I want to say something else. Jennifer Allen. Jennifer recently retired from Portland State University, where she was the Portland Professor of Environment and Natural Resources in the Marco Hatfield School of Government, and previously served as director of PSU's Institute for Sustainable Solutions. And she served on our board before, but she had to get off the board because she was given more responsibilities at work, and now she's retired and filling up her time. I'm a little bit scared about that because I'm going to retire in 260 some days, and I'm not ready to fill up my time yet. But thank you, Jennifer. Michael Wilson served as the Natural Resource Department Director for the Grand Ronde Tribe. He also is now retired. And he managed forestry and indigenous stewardship approaches and programs on the tribe's forest lands. And you can read more about Mike. I want to say one thing here, though, that I think is really important. The appointment of Mike Wilson is based on his skills and his experience in forest resource management and forest operations, including indigenous forestry. As an individual, he is a Grand Ronde tribal member, but we want to be clear that his proposed appointment to the Elliott board is as an individual, not as a representative of the Grand Ronde tribe or any other tribe. We also want to be clear that our indigenous partnership efforts related to the research forest remain under development, including how integration of tribes in the Elliott governance occurs, including potential MOUs or other options. And we've spoken to tribes about that. We wanted to respect tribal input on providing more space and time for work with tribes in crafting approaches to integrating indigenous forestry stewardship, cultural practices, and other interests in the Elliott research and management. And for that reason, the forest management plan provides a placeholder for this work and a circle back commitment that is ongoing with the tribes. It had a start and it doesn't have an end. So we will continue to work with all 5 Western tribes who would like to engage with us. But Mike is serving on the board as an individual. I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so with that, unless you have any questions, I would recommend the State Land Board appoint the remaining 3 voting members of the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors from the department's candidate list and make all the other board members happy to have a complete board.
Thank you, Director. And I forgot to mention at the beginning, as an action item, we do take public testimony. There's no public testimony on this item. So I will entertain a motion on that recommendation.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the recommendation and that Peyton Smith, Mike Wilson, and Jennifer Allen be appointed to the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Do I have a second? Thank you, Madam Secretary. Appreciate that. Any discussion? I just want to start off by thanking the folks who are serving now and the 3 individuals willing to step forward. I think it's always so gratifying to know that we have talented individuals across our state who are willing to serve in volunteer capacities in very important roles. And so we have another great group of folks who want to add to another existing great group of folks. So any other questions or comments about the motion? Seeing none, any objection to the motion? Seeing none, motion carries. That wraps us up on item number 2. We'll move to action item number 3, forest management plan for the Elliott State Research Forest. So we do have some public testimony signed up for this, but I think what we'll start is, Dr. Walker, if you would do the introduction on the item. And then I think then I will take the public testimony. And for those who are testifying in person or by Zoom, you will have 3 minutes. And then any presentation?
Mr. Brownscombe would join me to tell you what's in the plan,
Okay.
which might be important before we take public
Then
testimony.
why don't we do that? Because I think if we have that grounding, hear the public testimony and then continue with the discussion based on that. So
And
yes.
then after that, we have a science panel that would like to speak to the science aspect of the forest. And then we also have the 3 members of the Elliott board that would like to testify. And then we thought we'd take public testimony. If you want to switch that up, you're welcome to do that.
Let's switch it up only because in case there are things that are raised in the public testimony that folks might want to address, we'll do that.
So
Or not. It depends on what the public testimony is. So, okay.
So Brett and I will speak and then we'll have public testimony. All right, as you indicated, there are 3 folks who signed up to testify, and then there are 3 written submissions as well. Anyway, I appreciate being here because, oh my goodness sakes, the forest management plan has been no small endeavor. for any forest. And the Elliott is certainly not an ordinary forest. And I'm taking credit only because I'm the director of the agency, but the guy sitting next to me did yeoman's work, wrote this thing based on what Oregon State University had put together, and then we made it our own. But I'm going to let him talk about that later. So coming to agreement on the Elliott's future as a publicly owned research forest was in itself an amazing achievement. Putting that vision on paper took tremendous effort by many, not just Brett, but many people who were involved in it. And we'll be talking about all of the folks that testified and submitted comments, and we made changes in many places. The plan we're presenting today honors the foundations laid in years of collaboration. It was one of the reasons I was hired, was to bring this home. And while also allowing space for ongoing efforts and adjusting for the department's management. Just a few short months ago, it says 10 here, but it's got to be a lot longer than that. We laid out a pathway for establishing the research forest as Oregon's first state-owned research forest. We have since developed a DSL management structure with hiring of the initial Elliott team happening now is so exciting. And we secured legislative funding for this biennium. We have established an oversight structure, as I indicated earlier. And as of this morning, now that you've done so, we have a full board of directors, and they've been waiting a long time to be a real board. So I'm very excited. I'm going to have to bake cupcakes or something. We're going to have to celebrate. Work has also been continuing on the habitat conservation plan. That's a big, big deal. And Brett's going to talk about that because those permits are now not going to be delivered in December as we expected, but now early in 2025. And I give a stink eye to the Portland direction, I think, because the federal agency is committed to the end of the year and it's taking longer, but okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We're on schedule to start vetting a draft operations plan this winter, and that will set in motion management activity for 25-27. And I've made it clear to my staff that before I retire, we need to go out in the forest and cut our first tree and embrace the entire element this forest brings to Oregonians: recreation, forest management, protection of species, both aquatic and bird species, and riparian areas. I mean, this forest is going to deliver a lot, and we're going to have carbon. So I want to celebrate before I walk out the door. This was all possible because of the hard work and achievements since 2017, when the land board committed to a future of public ownership and access for the Elliott and set us on a pathway to explore the possibility of a research forest. And the young man sitting next to you was involved in that before he left to go help you in your office. But we've been in good company as we've stepped along that path, engaging with people of many perspectives, tribes, Oregon State University's College of Forestry, many state and federal agencies and elected officials, and more. We've accomplished a lot together. Decoupling the forest from the Common School Fund was an achievement. The legislature's commitment of $221 million to satisfy the forest's obligation to school children was such a critical moment in enabling a different and more sustainable future of the Elliott as a research forest, because we were going nowhere. We were absolutely stuck. So this enduring desire, many people with very different and very strong opinions to bring an Elliott State Research Forest to life has not faded at all. Oregonians are very good about staying strong with the things they believe in. But from a deeply conflicted past, we have and continue to move towards the future this plan represents. The Elliott as a nationally important center for forest science and management that also contributes to the things we value: conservation, education, recreation, and the economies right here in Oregon and the South Coast. I'm getting my goosebumps. I can't help it. The forest will be managed, excuse me, for multiple values, uses, and outcomes, and has the imprint of the many different interests who have shaped these efforts to date. Excuse me. My little grandchildren continue to give grandma their little colds that develop into something big. This provides the path forward with more durability and a research force that will generate management and research that shapes science and management policy well beyond the forest borders and the border of Oregon. With that background, I'll begin this item with an overview of the proposed forest management plan. We'll eventually hear from our panel of scientists about examples of the potential research possibilities, which are really cool. And that'll be followed by perspectives from those folks from the board who have stuck with us for so long. So I'm going to turn it over to Brett, who, as I said, has done absolute yeoman's work. I feel like we've been in a marriage almost, not as long as my marriage with my husband. I'm 50 years strong this coming year, but it's been like that because we've squabbled sometimes, we've agreed a lot, we've squabbled, we've agreed a lot. And wow, this is an achievement. And I know Brett's going to need a break after this, but I'm gonna, with all of that, and he knew I would just go on, but anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about how this great marriage of real skill has created this wonderful document. So here you go. You're on.
Thank you, Director Walker.
That's quite an intro, Brett. So
That's my retirement gig. I'm going to go on a comedy show.
Hey.
There you
Thank you, Director Walker. Thank you, Vicki, for your leadership and resolve in this marriage. And thank you. Good afternoon, Governor Kotek and Treasurer Reed and Secretary Valade. My name is Brett Brown-Scoman, for the record. I serve as the department's Elliott State Forest Transition Director, and my pronouns are he, him. The forest management plan, and Ted, if you could switch to the next slide. Thanks. The forest management plan, or the FMP, as I'll slip into acronym speak sometimes, is our guiding document for how the Elliott State Research Forest will be managed for a broad suite of public values. The plan was crafted on foundational direction for the research forest from the original Elliott State Forest Advisory Committee, including 3 tribes, the Oregon State University research proposal, and from you all as the State Land Board. The key points of what the forest management plan will do are directly tied to the directional framework that the Land Board has maintained for the Elliott since 2017, as referenced in Director Walker's remarks. The FMP builds on many years of research forest planning and public access, or public process rather, through the original and then various iterations of advisory committees, legislative engagement, multiple years of land board input, and both incorporation and revisions to the content in the forest management plan that Oregon State University developed and delivered in December of 2023. The acknowledgement section in the forest management plan acknowledges that and many of the contributions that we've received over the years. It was hard to enumerate who and how many, and I'm sure we've missed some, but as Director Walker mentioned, this really has been a long-term effort with a lot of key moments and key people and entities involved, and we're really grateful to have all of that to build on. I'd like to talk more in a minute about the process and input that shaped the plan, but I do want to highlight something on the final bullet on the slide that's coming back to you in a second. The bullet is around ensuring continued public involvement and accountability. I'll wait for it. And that's a beautiful picture that I believe Katrina snapped.
The weather is causing all these outages today, I think.
I think we're there. There it is.
Is that it?
Thank you, Ted. Thanks, Sally. Okay, so yeah, one brief thing to say before moving into the process that shaped where we are with the proposed forest management plan. The last bullet here, in order to ensure public accountability in advancing this plan and management actions that stem from it, the department plans to incorporate the forest management plan, assuming it's adopted, as an Oregon administrative rule. And this is something that we heard during the public comment process as important around public accountability, and important for this plan to be responsive to that, and to be responsive to that. This plan commits to that as language as a rule incorporation path. Doing that would then set the forest management plan on a 5-year schedule of reviews under the Administrative Procedures Act. And I wanted to just hit that up front. The next slide gets into the development of the plan. And what you see on this slide are, okay, here we go. These are the key inputs. The white circles that you see are the key inputs that shape the proposed plan. So each of these circles are areas of engagement that informed our effort, including a public engagement process, listening sessions, a comment period, comment and response and revision process. And all of that is detailed more in Appendix B to your memo materials. This is the community engagement report. We also had meetings with an input from government agencies. This includes state agencies, in particular, Department of Forestry, DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as input from other entities, including Oregon State University. Input from these entities shaped revisions that we made to the FMP since it was released as a draft in June. And there's a separate circle here for tribes, even though certainly Oregon's federally recognized tribes are government entities. We wanted to bullet or pull that out separately as efforts that we made both at the outreach level at the tribal chair and council levels, but also working at the staff levels. And Appendix C in your memo materials is the government engagement or government summary engagement report. And that details more information about the summary of our efforts, including with tribal outreach and other government entities and the feedback we received. And then finally, the Elliott State Research Forest Board inputs from the Elliott Board were critical to our revisions and movement forward. And you'll hear from several members today, but one thing to point out here is that our revisions to the draft forest management plan also contain commitments around next steps that various Elliott Board members wanted to flag and recommend. That relates to resolving the research side of the forest, including partnership model and roles. It also includes the positive engagement of indigenous interests in stewardship, research, and governance. And then finally, further refinement of habitat restoration and monitoring approaches that integrate with local partners, including agencies, watershed groups, and practitioners, as well as their programs and relevant science. So next slide is what's in the plan, and we'll get into, there are a couple slides here, but at a high level, this slide depicts the FMP's chapters and offers a sense of the breadth and depth of what's contained in this plan as a guiding document for managing the forest. I especially want to note, and while I won't get into the details here, the department's made revisions to every one of the chapters in the draft that was in the draft FMP in response to what we heard during the engagement process. We received over 450 comment letters on the draft plan, many of which restated common themes, as well as a good number of which were unique letters identifying their own discrete comments. The vast majority of comments expressed support for the draft plan. And to be clear, there are some who would prefer a very different path for the Elliott than what the proposed FMP represents, either further towards timber harvest or further in the opposite direction. But the majority of commenters focused their input on specific issues or components within the proposed plan and gave us their input on direction they wanted to see or things they wanted to see changed. So in all cases, including where we disagreed with a comment, we provided a discrete response. And in many cases, the department agreed with the points made and advanced responsive revisions. So Appendix B, to your FMP memo, this is the community engagement report that prepared for us by ICF. That details the comments received and our responses to them. Next slide, I wanted to cover at a high level a few of the meaningful areas advanced through the public comment and response process that are reflected in the proposed plan. First off, on research, the proposed plan, it continues to advance the research principles from the original advisory committee, as well as other FMP provisions or management plan provisions that provide the structure for future research. Some comments and commenters encourage starting over entirely or abandoning an overarching research question and abandoning a lead partner structure, a research partner structure, which the department and the proposed FMP does not do. What we're advancing in the proposed FMP is a wide variety of research opportunities on the forest across many disciplines and recognizing both value in shorter term demonstrations as well as long-term longitudinal research. While the FMP speaks to the value of non-triad research areas and it enables different approaches and makes clear that rigid adherence to the triad research design is not required, the proposed plan does not preclude that research approach entirely. While it makes room for other research partnership models, it also does not abandon the lead research partnership approach. And so on these issues, this is really part of our next step conversations with Oregon State University, tribes, the Elliott Board of Directors, and others. The research remains central. The next major area that I wanted to highlight here is the self-sufficient working forest concept. And the proposed plan advances a variety of different forest management approaches and research, some conservation and carbon sequestration focused and others focused on active harvest treatments, including intensive timber production as well as ecological forestry. Some commenters question the sustainability of the proposed approach and others criticized it for not harvesting more. So as usual with the Elliott, strong feelings on multiple sides. The proposed FMP clarifies that it does not intend to take a binary approach to forestry approaches or revenue. We feel that the existence of revenue from timber does not make something inherently unsustainable, and the existence of non-timber focused management approaches or revenue from such approaches like carbon the also does not fail financial viability. The the proposed FMP really takes a both and rather than an either or approach. And it advances self-sufficiency based on a business model that includes multiple revenue sources and a budgeting approach that prioritizes operational management costs first, and then scaling research funding to what remains available. Thirdly, on habitat, habitat diversity and restoration. Proposed FMP advances a variety of habitat types on the forest, that, as well as opportunities for research tied to those habitat types. And it recognizes the value in both old growth forest development as well as complex early sterile younger forest habitat. Some commenters encouraged conversion to mature and old growth conditions across the whole forest. And the proposed plan clarifies that any conservation research watershed, the big conservation block management, including extended time periods for thinning, must be conservation based and focused on optimizing carbon sequestration and related forest conditions. And that said, while it would occur more often in the management research watershed portion of the forest, the plan recognizes the value of early sterile habitat to biodiversity, recreation, and cultural benefits, including to indigenous culture. The proposed plan also was responsive to comments that we received around road density reductions, beaver habitat, the history and role of fire on the Elliott, and further aquatic restoration and monitoring strategy needs. And lastly, carbon sequestration. This was a very strong focus of public comments on the draft forest management plan, and the proposed plan enhances direction for carbon sequestration and related research on the forest in a variety of ways. A strong majority of commenters supported the draft plan's proposed incorporation of 10,000 additional acres into carbon sequestration focused designation. And what the proposed forest management plan advances is in addition of this acreage to the conservation research watersheds in that portion of the forest. So we feel like we were responsive strongly to that supportive public input. The proposed plan also advances carbon sequestration outcomes by supporting longer rotation, intensive forestry, as well as clear direction to advance a voluntary carbon market project. So in many ways, the research forest that the proposed forest management plan advances would be unique. And I think at a very pulling up at a high level, unique not just for Oregon, but nationally. Combining a habitat conservation plan, a carbon project, and a research forest all on the same landscape would be precedent setting. And to do it while further work does remain, the proposed plan would move the Elliott not simply into a new chapter for itself, but a place that's distinct in state land management. The last slide here is looking ahead and relevant to next steps, which I think are really important to kind of leave with as we launch into the next part of today's work. So I wanted to offer a brief context on implementation and next steps here. And should the board approve this initial forest management plan, next steps towards implementation would be addressing and resolving the research partnership model and roles on the research forest. This includes ongoing work with Oregon State University. While we can operate a forest in the near term, this next step is critical to finalizing research planning and implementing work ahead as a research forest. It will also include further meetings with staff from Western Oregon tribes associated with the Elliott landscape and their tribal councils if desired. That is a critical step in addressing intended partnerships and the shape of how Indigenous stewardship and research will be integrated into the Elliott. In important ways, this set of conversations with tribes is also connected to the research partnership model and next steps. And finally, we plan to advance planning and strategy work on recreation education, aquatic restoration, and monitoring with government agencies, interested tribes, local and statewide partners, and the public. This ongoing work and the next steps that remain to be pursued and done, it reflects the reality of where we are on the Elliott. This is an initial management plan for a first of its kind research forest, and the efforts come a long way. And the plan contains a structure and specific direction for moving forward now. That said, based on all of that, the FMP commits the department to returning with an update on this ongoing work in 1 year's time, or sooner if directed by you all as the land board. And I wanted to note that as an important next step. And with that, I think hand it back to Director Walker.
Thank you, Brett. I really appreciate your outline, and there might be some questions before you want to take the public testimony. So Governor, I'll let you control the meeting.
Thank you, Director. Yes, thank you, Brett. I would just, looking through the materials, the commitment to hearing from folks, responding, giving answers, making revisions, I think is a solid approach. And I just want to thank everyone involved with that. Public process is not always a linear thing, and there's a little back and forth. And it's good to see what was incorporated, what the responses were as you went forward in the engagement plan. So very, very helpful. Questions for Brett before we take public testimony?
So many, Madam Chair. I guess the first comment is more of an observation that really is consistent with what the director said. I feel like I've said this a number of times over the years, but it bears repeating, because each time we take a significant step forward here, it's worth considering how far we've come. I think back to 2017 and this idea of a research forest that seemed pretty far-fetched, and there have certainly been a lot of twists and turns, but it is really a big deal that we are here in a place that has managed to balance so many important values and interests, and we're still on a path to do that in a way, as you said, Mr. Branscombe, in a precedent-setting way. It's worth acknowledging all the people that helped to make that happen, and we're going to hear from some of them. The current board members are adding to that. Some people are in the room. Bob, Keith Timchuk, Melissa Cribbins, OSU, all the folks that have been here. So I just really want to acknowledge how we've been able to do that and keep all these competing interests in mind: public access and research and timber harvest. So many things meet in this place that have been central to our history as a state and to our future as a state. And for me, one of the most exciting pieces of it that flows from that recognition of competing interests is that we might be on a path to putting some stability in this place that has so long been a source of conflict and difficulty. So I guess that's one real question that was kind of an undercurrent in what you talked about, but I'd like to ask you to kind of surface that a little bit more. When was the last time we had timber harvest on the Elliott?
There's Brian.
Well, Treasurer,
Our most excellent forester, Ryan Singleton, said the last timber harvest was in 2016. That's a long time ago.
It is. So we're getting close to a decade without activity. So I heard what you said, Mr. Branscombe, and I think you're right. I had the same experience. People were saying that's not enough. Other people saying that's too much. For me, one of the most exciting things, whatever that number ends up being, is that we're on a path to having some stability and some predictability about that. So how would you characterize the modeling that went into that number? Is it conservative? Is it aggressive? How should we be thinking about that? that kind of number?
Sure. Yeah, Governor, members of the Land Board, Treasurer Reed, so we're on timber harvest modeling, I think some of the important things that we've recognized on the Elliott over time is getting back to a position of active management and timber harvest on the Elliott is no small thing. And the public will continue to be paying attention carefully, and our operations planning process for moving forward in 2025 will be kind of where the rubber hits the road on that initially. The things that we're contending with are not just staffing up a program and getting staff and operational work, the gears cranking on that, which will take time to ramp up, and also an age class model on the Elliott that is bimodal, and part of that has gone into our modeling efforts, and the assumptions that have been made are conservative. I think what we feel is reasonable but conservative. We've looked at areas of timber harvest prices and volume, or expectations around what volume would be within the trees that are harvested, that we feel don't get us too far over the skis, but also represent a reasonable approach. That said, that conservative approach, I think, is something that we have to test, and we'll know more about after the initial harvest work is done. We'll understand more about how those assumptions are playing out, both on the key variables to revenue related to log prices, volume in the trees, and other factors like logging costs. So part of it is, what they say about modeling, and I won't say it, but it's just you can expect some things from models, but then reality will show you what things look like when we actually get to work.
I was on the revenue committee in the legislature. I always used to say about our forecast, the only thing we know is that they're going to be wrong, but we have to start there. And so I appreciate that description of where we sit in terms of conservative or aggressive. Madam Chair, two more quick questions, if you don't mind. Thanks. The other question, Director Walker, you talked about where we sit on the HCP, and I share your disappointment or frustration at the speed not being what we hoped for. But could you offer a little more color to that description about where what we can expect back to the forecasts? But what do we know now, and what should we expect?
Well, actually, Mr. Treasurer, I think Brett is going to have a better sense of that because he sits in those meetings. I don't, I shoot my spitballs from afar, but he's in those meetings, and I was disappointed a couple months ago to learn it was going to be late. So you want to tell him why? Part of it is staff, but go ahead.
Sounds like there might be some more spitballs coming, but go right ahead.
Small part.
We're not arguing.
Yeah.
We're just trying to live in reality. Treasurer Reed, so the key next steps, we've submitted our final plan, and with the negotiations that occur in the nature of negotiating a habitat conservation plan and federal permits, the issuing agencies get to control when their interests have been met. We want their interests to be met in a positive way so that permits can be issued. So we're going through the back and forth on our final proposal, and some of the key next steps and reasons for extension relate to tying off the final back and forth and comments, but a lot of it really relates to the process that has to happen on the federal end before permits get issued, and that includes Federal Register notices, reviews through the solicitor's offices and legal counsel in the departments of Interior and then Commerce with NOAA Fisheries. The public, we're dealing with both a Habitat Endangered Species Act, Habitat Conservation Plan, and a National Environmental Policy Act process. And so the drafting and publication of a final environmental impact statement and record of decision on that is another thing that's making the wheels turn a little slower than what we had been assuming. But that said, so all of that rolls into why March of 2025 and not December of 2024. That said, we feel like our process for moving an operations plan forward and then being ready to hit the ground running with activity in 2025 can still proceed as planned. So I wanted to just share that as well.
Appreciate that. Obviously, big event happening 3 weeks from today. So I think all of us here share the interest in trying to move that along as quickly as possible. Given that while we don't know exactly what happens on 3 weeks from today, we do know there's going to be a change of administration in the White House. So that matters. So I think you can count on us if there are places for us to engage and try to help. We'd want to do that.
Thank you.
Last question relates to the comment one or both of you made around tribal participation, and that obviously matters a lot to me as well. So I'm interested in if there are any further updates, both in terms of the cultural resources and how that conversation proceeds, and the actual operations. You know, all of us have told stories about how we looked at the traditions of tribal nations and how they have managed forests, and how that conversation is going to be how it was and how it will be part of the conversation going forward.
Sure. Yeah, Treasurer Reed, and I think I know Director Walker has been having conversations at the tribal chair level, which has been really helpful. And then I've been working more at the staff level. And this is in part reflected in the government summary, government engagement report summary. So there are a number of different tribes that consider the Elliott their ancestral lands, and or can trace their ancestry back to people who lived, used, and called the Elliott their home, and it still is in many ways for many tribes a place where they're deeply connected, and we've heard that. And so what we've done in both the habitat conservation plan and the forest management plan is build in quite a bit of language around recognizing that and recognizing what our intentions are around healthy engagement and positive engagement of Indigenous interests in stewardship and research. And we've intentionally carved out, in response to expressed desires from tribes to see their culture restored on the Elliott and practices enabled and advanced on the Elliott, specific activities in the habitat conservation plan. So we have coverage for that, or clear descriptions in the forest management plan around those approaches. One thing we're hearing pretty clearly is capacity for tribal engagement is really tight, and many tribes across many different issues are being asked to engage, whether they be at the state level or federal level, more than ever. And the Elliott is one of those areas. It's not the only area where they're being asked to engage. And so it stretches capacity pretty thin. We've been advised to respect that and not take that as an indication of tribes not caring, but that capacity is a real issue that needs to be considered and addressed. And so we're having ongoing conversations around trying to get more clarity around what specifically, Indigenous management, stewardship, and research would look like on the Elliott, and then how do we commit to that in a way that's meaningful, whether that's through MOAs, MOUs, or other approaches. And hearing that in the context of limited capacity has really led us to that place of we're not done yet, and that's why this is one of the key areas that's teed up as a need for further ongoing work with tribes to kind of honor the don't rush when we don't have capacity. We really want to have these conversations, and our intent is to continue those forward and come back and in a year with where we are on that.
So let me just test my understanding of what you said. It sounds like obviously there's more work to do, but it is specifically called out, quantified, described, and there's a plan to make sure that you're striking the right balance of being intentional and strategic about when and where to acknowledge the capacity constraints, but it doesn't mean you're forgetting it. Have I got that anywhere close to accurate?
Yeah, thank you, Treasurer Reed. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a clear thing we've heard is, and that we want to honor is, no, we're not going to. If you adopt the forest management plan today, it doesn't mean we're done and something, we go poof and go implement things. This is a concerted commitment to those continued efforts and outcomes.
I will tell you, I've had a conversation with one of the tribal chairs about involving the tribe in a project area in the forest. And that was pretty interesting, and they wanted to hear more. So as we develop our operations plan, we'll be continuing to work with tribes and seeing how they can fit in with that. And I will also tell you, I feel really good about the department and our engagement with tribes. Particularly you were at the South Slough for the 50th anniversary. We worked very closely with 3 coastal tribes, the Coquel, the Siti Klutsi, and the Slets, on what we do in the South Slough. Now that's about 7,000 acres. It's only a portion of what we are here in the Elliott, but they are super involved, and they are involved at almost every level that I can think of management. And so we will continue to, as Brett mentioned, continue to bring them in as much as they wish to be. But I know they are also very busy with their own tracks and their own forest engagement models. But that doesn't mean we stop having conversations. And there's a larger cultural piece too. The CT Klutsi in particular have some real cultural attachment and acknowledgement of the Elliott. And there used to be a sweat lodge on top of that mountain when it was an inmate facility at Shutter Creek, but it was destroyed in the dismantling of the prison, and they were disappointed in that. So there were conversation at one time, and that may continue. I'm certain it will continue about where could we put a sweat lodge and find other ways for cultural observances in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for indulging this.
Absolutely. No problem, Mr. Treasurer. Just 2 comments to follow up on your questions. One, I just want folks to know that my office has been communicating with Department of Interior and NOAA on making those wheels turn a little faster on the HCP. And then on the, with regard, I want to do comment again on Appendix C, which is the government engagement summary report. And I'm just going to call out the item on page 4, where it does talk about tribes are appreciating the approach that DSL is taking, but there are always concerns. You have a history of broken promises. You want to make sure that conversations continue. And particularly it says the tribes worry that once the state land board adopts, if and when it adopts an initial MFP for the research forest, and the state will lose momentum or focus on conversations and advancement of next step commitments related to Indigenous stewardship, research, and governance of the forest. And I can just say personally that we will maintain that momentum. I think this is an evolving conversation. I think what's so unique about this is a starting point doesn't mean the end. We are moving forward on a variety of things, and the checkbacks and the momentum that have, I think, have been authentic and genuine will continue. And I'm particularly excited for this engagement with our tribal nations. I think it's important, and I think it's going to benefit the research and viability and sustainability of the research forest. So, Madam Secretary, any questions or comments?
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm so proud to be part of this discussion. And when the governor called and said, "Hey, do you want to be Secretary of State?" No mention of the landlord. But I'm so honored and thrilled because, as I say, I grew up in the timber wars, and that was a moment for this state, I believe. And the result is caretaking and the ability to reap from the forest what is viable, hopefully. That's what we're all here for, I think. And so I'm thrilled to be part of this discussion. My parents are probably turning over in their grave because, you know, that was really a tense time in this state. And so hopefully we're moving in a different direction. I'm sure there's still folks who are dissatisfied, but we've got the knowledge now that we didn't have before about taking care of our forests and also providing timber. And so I think we're in a good space.
I appreciate hearing that from you, Madam Secretary. I got goosebumps in and out of your conversation there.
Me too.
And you have grandchildren, I have grandchildren, and you and I have talked about our grandchildren before. This is a legacy to tell your grandchildren about, that you were part of it. And, you know, tangentially, you didn't know about it, but once you got here, you embraced it. And so I really appreciate that you've been able to see the achievements that we have made. It really is something special.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Director. On active management, and I just on a timeline with HCP decision not completed, what are the next steps on active management to produce revenue in the coming 6 to 9 months? How would you characterize that?
I'll say, how's that marriage going? We need to produce revenue. Absolutely. We've got some timber harvest planned out already. I think Ryan in the back, our forester, he's been working with Eric Farm, finding that low hanging fruit that doesn't impact any potential research. So there's quite a bit of that area that he's working on, and we'll have that operations plan ready by probably January, February at the latest. And so I'm pretty excited about it. They've been on the ground doing their work. And like I said, we've got, I hope we were very successful in hiring the right forest manager and forester and biologist and getting the staff. We've got one of the buildings at Shutter Creek almost ready to go. We had our maintenance staff find one of those buildings that wasn't too bad. And so it's been painted and carpet's been laid and we've got some furniture donated. And I mean, we're ready to go. We'll get the staff and we're moving. It's just, we've waited too long. All of it's taken so much longer than we anticipated. I never thought it would last through my tenure. I thought we'd be done in a couple of years, as did the previous governor. But we are not. But we are close. We are so close. I can feel it. And I'm very excited. And as Madam Secretary said, there are still people who are not happy. They want it to be like the old days where we just cut all kinds of trees. We can't do that anymore. We have to respect the fact that this forest has limitations. And I think we have found a way to satisfy the bulk of all of those interests and get us to a place of reconciliation and movement going forward.
Yeah, Governor, really quick to follow up on that. So we will have a draft operations plan for the 2025 to 2027 period circulating. And this will be part, I think, for the public watching or listening. There will be public process around this where we'll vet a draft operations plan through the Elliott Board of Directors process and with the public. And that will inform where we're going with, you know, the intent is to do the variety of different management types on the Elliott during that initial 2-year period. We would also advance the next steps of a carbon project as another next step. I think that one thing to note is the revenue from both timber harvest and carbon would not come immediately. Even if we contract as intended in 2025 for timber sales, that would put revenue out probably a couple of years. And so the next legislative session is a key point around the remaining startup costs and the budgeting. And we expect that the legislature will surely want to know, okay, well, when are we going to start operating self-sufficiently? And so that both those next moves I mentioned, including the operations plan, are critical to that. And like Director Walker mentioned, we're engaged with a private firm in Coos Bay, Farm Unlimited, who's very familiar with the Elliott, and our forester, Ryan Singleton's working on that. So there's the details are part of really what we're going to be working on this winter as part of the Elliott board and public engagement process.
That's very helpful, and I appreciate the frankness of where we are. And there's a lot of things, and big things take time sometimes. But we also need to know what kind of revenues we're projecting through the rest of the next biennium, so the legislature has some sense of what their obligation might have to be for this bridge. So knowing that will be super important. I would like to move on to public testimony at the moment, unless there's any more specific questions for Brett? No? Okay. Director Walker?
Yes, I think that'd be great. And just a time check, we'll probably end up going till 12:30 because we do have one more item on the agenda after the Elliott, and we have two more boards to hear from.
Correct. We have, so as I mentioned before, for the three individuals who signed up for public testimony, we're going to do 3 minutes each, or you don't have to take all 3 minutes. And then we have two more panels, I believe, and then we'll take it to final consideration. And then we do have another action item we have to get to today. So buckle up. We got a little more time to do here. So
All right, we'll step back and have the public come forward.
great. And I think we have one person in person and two folks on Zoom. So we'll start with the in-person individual, Mr. Zyback. There you are. Yes. He's joined us at the table.
Let me have my seatbelt.
We have a little timer up here, so we'll give you a ding, but just introduce yourself for the record and we'll hit the timer. So
Sure. I'm Bob Zyback, Northwest Maps Company, Oregon Websites and Watersheds Project. I've been testifying before this committee for nearly 10 years on this project. Here's a book I wrote, the Elliott. You all got a copy. I'm guessing nobody read it because it's boring. But on the cover is Wayne Giese, Jerry Phillips, and David Gould. And they've all testified here before several times on the same topic. They're all dead. They all died. They were arguing common school fund. They were arguing for local jobs. They were concerned about the HCP. My recent response to this board was a 32-page scientific peer review. I have a PhD in the study of Western Oregon wildfire. I started studying the Elliott with Jerry Phillips in 1987. I worked with Wayne Giese for 30-some years, and I worked with David Gould for the last 10. Our work has been totally ignored. The HCP has been going on since 1996. In 2019, I wrote an article, which is in the book, and it was published in January 2020, called Elliott Boondoggle and the Giese Plan Alternative. We were concerned at that time because you were going to have an HCP by 2020 or 2021, 2022. You were going to have a management plan, 2021, 2022. Never happened. We predicted it wouldn't happen because the plan is based on a model that can't work. It's got a 17 million board feet maximum harvest. There's been no harvest for 8 years. The Elliott grows 60 million feet a year. That's 480 million feet of fuel. 2 sessions ago, we were told that the HCP now had 9,000 polygons and a similar number of acronyms, probably. When the forest burnt in 1873, there was one polygon. When the Columbus Day storm blew in 1962, 100 million feet of 70-year-old second growth blew down. 300 million feet had to be harvested. There's nothing in this plan that covers windstorms or wildfires. In 1996, there were widespread landslides on the Elliott. My PhD was completed in 2003. And at that time, I was recognized as an expert on Elliott fire history. Now, Oregon State has spent millions of dollars. We've had the DSL spend millions of dollars. 8 years, not a single tree's been cut. An HCP is a federal regulation where the federal government manages our land. In early 90s, 93, I predicted that if we took wilderness areas, HCPs, and other passive management approaches to our forests, we would have catastrophic wildfires. My predictions have all come true. Here's a picture from my dissertation showing a landslide in the Elliott that created a lake in 1893. The picture was from David Gould's family. It was given to me by Jerry Phillips. In the 5 years that this planning process has been going on, there's not been a single consultation with me, Jerry, or David. My work, a dissertation from Oregon State College of Forestry, wasn't even cited in their 640-page plan. The literature review didn't exist. It's a totally biased document based on modeling, not documentation. My documentation has consistently shown that there are serious assumption errors in the modeling programs being used. That's why they're failing. That's why this is still a boondoggle. It's been going on and on. It's costing money. The revenue stream is dependent on putting people out of work to create carbon credits. The carbon credits theoretically are to control the environment of the earth. That's crazy. It can't happen. We are wasting billions of dollars putting our forests and our communities at risk of wildfire. Those wildfires have been happening, and that's what we're doing again on the Elliott. It's clearly building up fuels that will create a hazardous environment. There's nothing in the plan that accounts for that.
Thank you, Mr. Zyback. And because of your passion and commitment, I let you go a little long, and I really do appreciate you being here today. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And all of my appearances and efforts have resulted in nothing. And that's the same with the other three men. We've had an opportunity to speak, and there's been no follow-up.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yep.
We have two individuals who signed up for public testimony. Michael Lang, I'm looking at tech back there. Are they zooming in? There we are.
Good morning, members of the board and Director
Then we have
Walker.
our third person will be Mark Stern. So, Mr. Lang, would you like to introduce yourself for the record? And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, members of the board and Director Walker. My name is Michael Lang, and I work for the Wild Salmon Center. The Wild Salmon Center is a leading conservation organization working to restore.
I don't think we can hear Mr. Lang.
No. Governor, can you hear me now?
Nope. Might want to check. Maybe we need to click on a different mic on your end, because it doesn't look like you're muted. So how about Mr. Lang? Just check on your audio there, and then let's do Mr. Stern. Mark Stern, I see you on there. Let's try you, and then we'll come back to Mr. Lang. Mr. Stern, just introduce yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Governor, Secretary Griffith Valade, and
okay, we have audio problems for you as well. Apologies. I don't know what's going on. So, Mr. Lang, do you want to try again? I see you have a headset on. Want to try again?
Thank you, Governor. Can you hear me now?
Nope. Okay, problems on our end. Okay. We will come back to you while we figure out what is going on with our audio, because we cannot hear you in the room. So thank you. We'll come back to public testimony there. I think we have a panel, our next panel. Oh, but if we have virtual, we might be having.
We have virtual.
Okay, how about this? Ooh, we got sound. Okay. Way to go, Mr. Lang. Okay. Mr. Lang, let's go with you. You got 3 minutes. Introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I just want to confirm that you can hear me now.
You're good to
All
go.
right. So good. Good morning, members of the board, Director Walker. My name is Michael Lang. I work for the Wild Salmon Center. Wild Salmon Center is a leading conservation organization working to restore Pacific salmon populations across their entire range. Thanks for the opportunity to provide some brief comments today in support of the Forest Management Plan. We've added more detailed comments in the draft FMP, and we're pleased that some of our recommendations were incorporated into the final. In summary, we support the adoption of the FMP, and we want to thank you for the inclusion of an additional 10,000 acres to the conservation research watershed to further advance carbon sequestration. We also want to express our support for longer rotations to increase carbon sequestration and provide habitat for at-risk species. While we generally support moving forward with a voluntary carbon market project, we want to make sure that the carbon credits are based on real constraints that go above and beyond what otherwise would be legally required. And finally, we support the adoption of the FMP as an administrative rule. This is consistent with other state forest plans in Oregon and is essential for providing accountability for implementing the plan's requirements. So thank you for considering these comments and thank you all for your incredible work on advancing this FMP.
Thank you for your public testimony, Mr. Lang. Mr. Stern, please, we'll have you come back up. Well, hopefully your audio, you want to test it a moment? You're on mute at the moment, I think. I think the mute's. Try saying something again.
Governor, can you hear me now?
Mm.
No?
There you go. There you go. Okay. Just introduce yourself for the record. You have 3 minutes. Thank you for your patience on our technical difficulties.
Yeah, good morning, Governor, Secretary Griffin-Fillade, and Treasurer Reed. My name is Mark Stern. I worked for the Nature Conservancy in Oregon and led the Forest Conservation and Wildfire Program for the last decade before retiring in 2020. In 2018, Director Walker appointed me to, and I served on the Elliott State Research Forest Advisory Committee. And I'll share with you that I also serve as the vice chair on the Private Forest Accord Mitigation Advisory Committee for ODF&W and also on their Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund committee. And I look forward to talking with all of you at another time in an informational conversation about the Conservation and Recreation Fund and the opportunities there, specifically to engage underserved, underrepresented communities, organizations, and people as we support fish and wildlife in Oregon. Regarding the forest management plan, I'll second some of the comments you've already heard, but I really appreciate everybody's time and effort in making it happen, particularly Brett and Ryan Singleton, as well as the rest of the staff. I would encourage the land board to adopt this version of the forest management plan. For me, it's one of the 4 foundational pillars that help guide and direct management on the Elliott, the others being the proposal by OSU in 2019 that essentially set out the triad framework. The next is the legislation that was passed in 2020 that importantly provided $221 million to decouple the forest from the Common School Fund. And then lastly, the HCP that will be completed in 2025, as you'd heard. So these 4 documents are really important, and I really appreciated hearing Brett suggest and propose that the forest management plan would be adopted into administrative rule, because I think that would help solidify the sideboards and the guidelines along with the other foundational documents. Governor, I also wanted to thank you and the staff for adding 10,000 acres to the conservation research watershed. I think that's really important as we look at continuity across the forested landscape and also consider the benefits of carbon in that watershed going forward. And again, I would support the efforts by the staff to consider how to involve the Elliott with a carbon program there, again, ensuring that there's additionality is really real and accountable, so to speak, as you move forward there. So those are my thoughts. Again, I really appreciate everybody's time and effort. It's been an incredible lift, and I'm glad to see it crossing this threshold here, and I hope you'll adopt the forest management plan today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stern, for your public testimony. And with that, we'll close the public testimony. Those were the individuals we had signed up, and we will move on to we're talking with the board. It's the board next or the science panel?
We have a science panel.
And everyone is virtual.
And everyone, let's see, yes, they're all virtual. Gordy Reeves, John Tokarczyk, and Norm Johnson are all joining us by Zoom. I see John. So, John, since we can see you first, if Ted can get you going, we'll hear from you.
Yes, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. And for everyone, thank you for joining us. Just, state your name for the record. And we are trying to keep this pretty tight. I don't know how much time folks were asked to do, but if you go long, I might pop in. So thanks.
Sounds good. For the record, John Tokarczyk. I am the director of the Forest Resources Program at the Oregon Department of Forestry. As Oregon Department of Forestry staff engaged in ecological forest dynamics, climate, and carbon flux, and who also informed development of the climate change carbon plan, we were asked by the Department of State Lands to review the Elliott State Research Forest approach to carbon and climate-related management. The approaches taken in the Elliott State Research Forest Management Plan advanced the climate-smart forestry parameters of the climate change carbon plan through increasing carbon sequestration by longer rotations that reach culmination of mean annual increment, maintaining a diverse landscape of species and stand ages, and incorporating research and monitoring to assess flux and ecosystem changes that take place. Climate smart forestry is a refinement of sustainable forestry and entails consideration of climate mitigation, adaptation, and social elements of forest management. Carbon sequestration is the functional driver of active climate mitigation and simultaneous fulfillment of social benefits through timber production and utilization, particularly forests allowed to age, as it provides greater value through economic and diversified product lines, additional habitat diversity, and co-benefits to natural and human needs. The Elliott State Research Forest Management Plan has the scale and long-term outlook for informing and supporting really needed research opportunities to improve understanding of climate change, carbon dynamics, and management on Coast Range forests. Could go on for a long ways relative to the direct research opportunities, but just to hit a few highlights given the time constraints. Mitigation and adaptation. Research and management on the Elliott has the capacity to address both the role of forests in mitigating climate change and the ability of forest ecosystems to adapt to changing conditions. Climate change adaptation research and management on the forest could include incorporation of management approaches that consider impacts of climate change, as well as research and monitoring of reserves where natural disturbance and other change impacts will occur without management. As we heard previously, this is a unique forest, unique opportunity, and the plan as developed allows for a realm of substantive and meaningful research opportunities. Additionally, further work relative to extending rotations, the minimum rotation for regeneration harvests and intensive treatments, and minimum for extensive treatments support this area of need. Lengthening the harvest rotation periods has been shown to increase carbon stocks and will be a foundation of the management plan. In the PNW, rotations range dramatically, many between 35 and 50, but productivity peaks much later. The area of management and research connects to further needed work on full life cycle analysis of carbon storage, and the Elliott provides opportunities for this across a range of ages and in a research forest context. Going further, improved ecosystem evaluation and modeling. Brett noted this earlier, and it's come up in several regards. Forest modeling and prediction systems improve as new research and understanding emerges. The Elliott approach and management practices provide a unique opportunity to provide critical information assessing the carbon consequences of alternative forest management scenarios. The Elliott offers opportunities to test and improve models for coastal range PNW forests through ground truthing observations for remote sensing, realized through integration with other partnerships and collaboration factors. Also implementing carbon monitoring within plot monitoring systems to quantify how climate change affects soil processes, microbiome interactions, and assessments of tree seedling, establishment, survival, integration, validation of vulnerability assessments, all the pieces that go to having a better understanding of climate change and methods of adaptation and response. I'm probably getting bumping close to my time.
Actually, yeah, Dr. Tokarczyk, yes, I'm gonna thank you for that. And what I'd like to do is go through the individuals on this panel, similar time frame, so 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll take questions there. So so don't go anywhere, Dr. Tokarczyk, we appreciate you.
Dr. Reeves wanted to go next.
Okay, Dr. Reeves.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the board for being willing to hear this discussion. Just as a brief background, I've been working on the issue since I retired from the U.S. Forest Service after 35 years. So it was supposed to be a 3-month appointment. It's going on 6 years. And I have to say, it's been one of the more challenging but rewarding experiences I've had. So with regard to the Elliott, you know, it's an important place that's going to allow us to examine some key issues. And one of them is dealing with active management in riparian areas. A basic tenet in our policies and practices has been that we don't do active management in riparian and aquatic ecosystems, and that no action results in no effect. And as a result, we've got probably thousands and thousands of acres of riparian systems in Oregon and elsewhere in the Pacific Northwest that are in need of management, because we now know that they're probably not functioning as they should. There's a growing concern in parts of the scientific community that previously managed riparian systems are in need of active management. And if we want to restore the ecological processes and gain the benefit for conservation and other aspects, we're going to need to do active management in these riparian areas. And this includes we were talking about the tribal needs. One of the major needs we heard in the discussions over the last couple of years has been for the reestablishment of red cedar. Without active management in the riparian areas, we are not going to be able to meet that social and cultural needs. The Elliott provides an ideal setting for doing this type of effort. Okay, the riparian areas on the forest represent a range of conditions, from pristine to heavily managed, and it's set in a landscape with a high density of streams and an array of native fish, including those that are in need of special protection because of ESA. The need for this research has been recognized by many parties involved with both the HCP and the FMP. And as a result, we have a group of researchers from OSU, and I want to emphasize from the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is a real first. We're developing a study plan that will assess the effects of actively managing previously managed riparian areas. This could be one of the first and most comprehensive efforts to examine this issue, and will result in immediate application in policy and management arenas. This is a good example, I think, of the type of research that can be done on the Elliott that will provide policymakers, regulators, and managers with the knowledge and understanding to develop new and innovative approaches to the management of forest and aquatic ecosystems in Oregon, the Pacific Northwest, and elsewhere. So with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Is it Dr. Reeves or Mr. Reeves? I want to make sure I have your. We'll go with
Dr. Reeves.
Dr. Reeves.
Three doctors.
Oh, we got 3 doctors. Okay. Thank you very much for that. You're getting me excited about research on the forest, both of you. So,
Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Johnson.
Hello, I'm very glad to be here. We live in the hills of the Coast Range and our signal is pretty weak, so I'm just going to stay on without the video. But thank you very much. My name is Norm Johnson, and I'm a retired professor from the College of Forestry, where I taught management and forest planning and policy. And I've worked on federal forest issues for a long time, especially with Jerry Franklin. When in 2018, when Jeff Huntington asked me to help develop a forest plan for the Elliott Research Forest, I immediately agreed because I thought it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to do research on important public policy issues in forests with lands that are much less encumbered than the federal lands. I helped out for a while, and then Jerry Franklin and I talked at meetings on the Elliott and also put in public comments over time on the research design and protection of large or old forest. Finally, my last graduate student is Deanne Carlson. She has just finished her thesis, which had the Elliott as a case study on the relationship between streams and large wood. And so in the last few months, yes, I've been really involved in studying the Elliott, as she just finished her PhD last week. When we looked at the Elliott and what the proposals were, I was just delighted about that one of the major management strategies was ecological forestry. Jerry Franklin and I have been strong advocates for that for at least a decade, and it's really become, in a large sense, the coin of the realm for many types of forestry that happen out here. I was especially interested in the fact that there could be a comparison between ecological forestry and intensive management. Intensive management, you generally grow trees like corn, you cut them, clear cut the forest, and then plant it and with the trees you desire and suppress the vegetation of other plants. Ecological forestry has a different model than the agricultural model of plantations. It is an ecological model that basically is key to trying to maintain many of the processes and structures of the forest as you do harvest trees through time. Thus, when you harvest them, you leave some of the forest as a legacy, and you also allow that diverse early several stage to flourish for a while the little trees come through. The Elliott presents an amazingly valuable opportunity to compare them in a research context. And for that, we need at least about 1,000 acres allocated to this comparison. If it isn't done in the Elliott, I don't know where else it will be, but it is addressing one of the fundamental forestry questions of our time and would be of value to both Oregonians and nationally. And so I urge you to undertake that effort with about 1,000 of the acres, which are basically where that kind of research is the top priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson and Dr. Reeves and Dr. Tokarczyk. I believe that is our three individuals. That's ours. I really appreciate, and with all seriousness, the excitement about what we can do on this forest from a research perspective is tremendous. So thank you for that input. Any questions for our esteemed scientists?
Thanks for the work.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Madam Secretary, any questions? Thank you, Madam Secretary. And I'm always excited when, as we move forward, we can, be the cutting edge of research nationally. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us. So my only ask of you is continue to stay engaged. You don't get to be retired. Sorry, that doesn't work. So we appreciate you all continue to be part of this. Thank you very much for your input today. And then Dr. Walker, I think we were going to hear from some of the board members.
We are. Mr. Salinger and Ms. Lutz are in the room. If you could come up and join me and Mr. Timchuk is on the screen and he wanted to go last. I think Mr. Salinger is going to go first. You've got a microphone down there. And you can use this one. And before they speak, one of the common themes I'm hearing today is how they got involved for a short term in 2018 and they're here 6 years later. I would say Bob reminds me of that frequently because it wasn't supposed to take this long. And Haley came in just recently. So I just want to, there's so much thanks to go around for these people who have really stuck it out. Mark Stern was with us for a while. We had other representatives from the Wild Salmon Center. I mean, we have had a lot of folks interested in the Elliott, but Bob's one of our longest serving members. So
Thank you, Director. And when you're doing forest work, you're in it for the long haul. So
That's
what is this short-term stuff? It doesn't work. So you have a couple minutes each, and please just state your name for the record. Appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Bob Solinger, and I have been involved with the Elliott now really for about 15 years as a litigant, opposing the sale of the Elliott as a member of the stakeholder group and the first board and now the second board. So it's just been a long haul. As Vicki mentioned, this was a 1-year tour of duty, so a little bit longer. So I'm here this morning to support advancing the FMP forward. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. It's gone through a lot of twists and turns, but I think we're there. I think it's benefited from those. It's evolved a lot. And especially appreciate the work of Brett on that. Also appreciate the fact that the land board persevered and stayed the course as we went through some of those twists and turns. I think it would have been easy for people to bail out at various points. One of the things that gives me a lot of hope about this is people have really stuck to the table. There have been lots and lots of opportunities to leave. And in fact, people have doubled down and stayed. A couple of things I want to call your attention to. One is the 10,000 acres. Governor, I really appreciate your advancing those 10,000 acres into the CRW. I think it speaks really strongly about the commitment to climate change strategies and also climate change research. The Elliott really should be an incubator for climate research. So thank you for that, and thank you for making a strong statement on climate change. So I want to call attention to the commitment to adopt this into administrative rule. That's really important. It should happen soon. It really is a matter of transparency and accountability. It's always been something we've been talking about, but it got delayed as we took those twists and turns. Also support moving forward with carbon credits. As you already heard from some other enviros, we want to make sure it is truly providing additionality. That's about making sure that they're credible, that we're actually doing something that otherwise we would not. But that has always been part of the puzzle from the get-go. And I think part of the reason we're here today where we're at is because of that being in the mix. And kudos to Jeff Huntington for all of his work on that. One of the things I'm really excited about is looking at the road network on the Elliott. That's part of one of the things that's been highlighted as things next step in this planning process. There are 1,000 miles of streams on the Elliott and 500 miles of roads. For every mile of stream, there's a half a mile of road. That's pretty amazing when you think about this being a forest. So I think there's some opportunity to make some progress there and remove some of those, I hope, over time. A few other things. One is we are really, I think, entering the public phase of this again. Some of the work over the last 6 years has kind of been a little bit behind the scenes. It's been kind of make it up as you go a little bit. I'd really love to see, as a board member, the Elliott really become a public forest again, and really double down on the need to do real public process around decision making and kind of get into a much more formal kind of structure. I think that's really important as we especially move into implementation. Last thing is that public did spend $221 million to buy the Elliott out of the Common School Fund, and to take that pressure off of timber harvest to provide money for schools. And I think it's really important that we keep our eyes on that as we go forward and ensure that we don't wind up back in that same situation where something else is driving timber harvest beyond what is sustainable or what's in the plan. And I think particularly of the costs associated with the Elliott, I think we need to start out slow, build carefully, and make sure that work is driven by the research, by the plan, and not by a need to generate revenue. And so that's probably my biggest concern as we head into this phase, is we're going to get back into that kind of paradigm where we're constantly chasing the money and trying to squeeze as much out of that forest as we can. If nothing else, that $221 million should have bought us some flexibility. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for being here. And Ms. Lutz.
Push the button down below, right there. You go.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today. My name is Haley Lutz, and I'm a recent addition to the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors. And I'm also the Executive Director for the Coos Watershed Association in Coos Bay. Our Watershed Council, along with a suite of partners and funders, has invested over $10 million in coho restoration, water quality improvement projects, and monitoring over on the Elliott. Most of these dollars have been directly invested back into our economy through jobs, contractors, and supply purchases. The state has an important opportunity through the adoption of the FMP and future operations planning to prioritize and maximize watershed health and coho productivity on the forest, all of which are absolutely key to our economy. Our organization, along with many other local, state, and federal agencies, are ready to leverage our resources and partner with DSL, the lead research entity, and timber operators to continue this collaborative work together on the Elliott. And we think it needs to happen as soon as possible. As a board member, I feel it's critical to determine whether or not Oregon State University will be acting as the lead research entity for the forest. Habitat Conservation Plan, and although it has been expanded to leave flexibility, the Forest Management Plan, they're all based on OSU's involvement and their specific research design. The lack of clarity on OSU's involvement is complicating the time-sensitive process of moving the forest forward. I appreciate the one-year timeline of revisiting the FMP and the role of the lead researcher in mind, but I recommend that this issue get resolved within the next few months so that the board and DSL can be productive and strategic in how we move forward. There is still work to be done in advancing a working operational research forest, but I do think this FMP is a solid start in that direction. I appreciate the specific acknowledgement in the draft of the substantial work that truly does need to be done, and I believe it must be prioritized, specifically in regards to integrating Indigenous priorities, establishing a robust restoration and monitoring framework, timber operations planning, and further integrating wildlife habitat as well as hunting and recreation opportunities throughout the forest. I think it is imperative that the community be meaningfully engaged and at the forefront of those planning efforts, and that there be a one-year timeline attached to that update so that the public can really depend on. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on the Elliott State Research Forest Board of Directors and to provide comment today. It is a true pleasure to get to be a part of setting the foundation of this new chapter of the Elliott. And I really do hope it's one that will integrate and value the diverse cultural, social, economic, and ecological needs of our state and the local communities that call the Elliott home. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. And I think Keith is on the line.
And I'm here.
There you are. We can hear you. Just say who you are and you got a couple minutes. Hey, Keith.
Thank you. I'm Keith Timchuk from Reesport. I've been a member of this process since its inception. And before I begin, I'd certainly like to thank the Land Board for all they've done to support the work, the very valuable work I think we've done over the many years. Thank you. I've been engaged in the effort to transform the Elliott into the state's first research forest since its very inception. I was part of the original DSL advisory committee. I've served as a board member and on all the advisory bodies in between. And this process, to quote the most underrated of all songs by the Beatles, has been a long and winding road. There have been multitudes of agreements and disagreements and compromises that have brought the research forest to this point that we are at today. We've nearly fallen apart, and we've repaired ourselves and patched ourselves together and continued to move forward for more than 6 years. At all points, this process has tasted and smelled like Oregon. This has been an effort where multiple interests, values, and perspectives have shaped where we are today, and the research forest approach represented by the proposed forest management plan. It's been messy, and certainly we've arrived at a place that isn't perfect in any sense. There is no perfect to be found. If I ran the world, it would be something somewhat different than the forest that we are proposing. But that's the point. I don't run the world. And to make something durable, it needs to reflect very broad interests, the interests of Haley and Bob and I and the state of Oregon. And what we've done on the Elliott does just that. The Elliott now stands a better chance than ever to move beyond the conflict and the collision and the contention that has dominated its most recent past and into a future that can do better service to the state, to its citizens, and to this special forest. And I say special forest because I think I've probably spent more time, minus Ryan Singleton, in the forest over the last 45 years than anybody else who's been involved. I'm a multi-generational South Coast resident, a school teacher, now on the last legs of 40 years. I'm a former mayor, a port commissioner, and an avid fisherman hunter, and have run around the Elliott chasing game for a long, long time. I've seen our South Coast communities and economies changed, and it's not all been rosy, as you well know, but it's certainly not without hope. And I think I've been, in many ways, I've been around the block down here a few times. And yet, in many ways, I will look back on this process and regard what we've been doing on the Elliott as perhaps the best thing, minus my years in the classroom, that I've ever been involved with. The effort on the Elliott represents something uniquely Oregon. People have come together to chart a path forward that is different than the past. Sure, as with any issue involving significant change, not everyone across the public is on board. We should expect that. But many are, and those who have been closest to the working on this effort are, and we're still here. Personally, I'm glad the Elliott will continue a timber harvest. And I would admit that I would, were it me as king of the world, I would personally like more levels of harvest than we're seeing. And as a hunter, early seral habitat is important to me because that provides for recreational opportunities for people in this forest. And along those lines, I'd prefer more harvest and a little less carbon sequestration, were it me personally. But I also recognize that there are many people who see the opposite side of those issues. And I also know that diversifying management approaches, types of research, and business models is part of what we have collectively been trying to do here on the Elliott. So the compromise, an incredible compromise, is something I can live with and something I can be remarkably proud of. I believe we have achieved something that supports fundamentals around keeping the Elliott public, advancing recreation and access, balancing sustainable timber harvest and conservation outcomes, and doing it all within a research forest that will be unique in North America and perhaps the world. I believe that our effort will be self-sustaining and viable financially. It won't be without difficulty. Yet, I believe the important next steps will bear out where we are moving, and the direction remains positive. I know that we will resolve and positively integrate partnerships that include the research role for others, and hopefully OSU, and the stewardship roles for tribes as well. I believe the Elliott State Research Forest can bring attention, energy, and outcomes beyond what people can see right in front of them right now. Energy, attention, and outcomes down the line that we cannot yet predict. Of all the things I've done in my public service, I think the Elliott will stand out, as I've said. I'm proud of what we've done. I think the forest management plan is excellent, and I support where we're moving, and I applaud the land board for your support in the future and for that very stable support you've given us in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Timchuk, and Bob, Haley, and Keith, thank you. We'll see if anyone has any questions for the board members before we, no?
I just would make another attempt, a very poor attempt at acknowledging and thanking this group and all the people who have come before to get us to this point. So, sincere thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And thank you for providing that testimony and feedback today. We appreciate that. Those are the individuals that we had set up, and public testimony, arranged testimony, everybody has.
That's it, Governor.
So we're at the point to entertain a recommendation. So
yeah, the department is proud to recommend that the State Land Board adopt the initial forest management plan before you today for the Elliott State Research Forest.
Thank you, Director Walker. Do I have a motion?
I'm sure I move that we approve the recommendation, to adopt the initial forest management plan for the Elliott State.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and conclusion of your persistence as well.
I'm sure we're not done yet.
No, we are not done yet. And do I have a second?
Happily, I give a second.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Comments before we do a final vote? Mr. Treasurer, anything?
I've said it many times today, and I'll continue to say it. Very proud of this work and eager to keep it going.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Madam Secretary?
I mentioned this already. I'm very honored and pleased to be part of this group and to learn about this forest, which I didn't know about before at all. And it's been a learning experience and also a wonderful experience to broaden my horizon. Maybe I'll write another mystery and it'll have the
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And all I would say is, the adoption that we're going to take up here of the initial forest management plan for the Elliott State Research Forest, in all the conversation today, you hear words like collaboration and a sturdy approach and a scientific approach and an opportunity. This is an important milestone today. The work is never done. I think we all know that, but this is an incredible strong place to be after a lot of hard work. So appreciate everyone. Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, motion passes.
Oh, Governor, I didn't get goosebumps with that. I got tears because it's tears of exhaustion and tears of joy.
All good things are worth it, Madam Director. All good things are worth it. So
exactly.
And I know we have been holding people here a lot, but we have one more action item, item number 4, the school lands asset management plan. So if we could go to item number 4, excuse me. Yes, 4.
Governor, I'd like to, the issue is whether the land board should adopt the 2024 asset management plan, which guides this great department's management of range lands, forest lands, and other lands dedicated to funding K-12 public schools for the next 10 years. The authorities are set out below. I'd like to welcome to the table Bill Ryan, Deputy for Aquatic Resource Management, and I believe Amber McKernan, our real property manager from the Bend office, is also joining us. And I just have to tell you, this has been a big, big lift. I mean, not as big as the Elliott, but pretty close. It's been a lot of work, and I'm so proud of my staff. And I'm going to let them tell you all about it.
Thank you, Director Walker, and welcome. Just announce yourself for the record.
Yes. Good afternoon. It says morning in my notes. Good afternoon, Governor Kotek, Secretary Griffin Valade, and Treasurer Reed. My name is Bill Ryan. I am Deputy Director for the Department of State Lands, and I'm joined by Amber McKernan, our Real Property Program Manager. And we are pleased to present a short overview of the newly updated asset management plan that will guide our work on land management for the coming decade. Next slide, please. Or actually, a slide, please.
Don't want to miss out on these slides because they're beautiful.
There we go. Can I get slide 2, please? Thank you. All right, so provide a little bit of background. In 1995, the legislature directed the land board to adopt an asset management plan. The plan before you is actually the 4th version of the asset management plan. Since the first one was adopted. Today, we will share some highlights from the plan, including the major changes, priority action areas, and how we'll measure success. But first, I want to share a little bit about the work behind developing this latest update. And as Director Walker said, we've got some beautiful photos here. That's that's a photo of our Lone Pine property near Burns. Next slide, please. So we kicked off this effort in 2022 when we presented a report to the land board that looked back at the previous decade of land management. That included what worked, what didn't, and areas of opportunity to explore. This was the foundation that we built from in revising the plan. We then did some initial work that involved early outreach to the public and partners to hear their perspectives. We also looked at similar planning efforts in 12 other states to see how they're managing their real property assets. Throughout 2023, staff developed and shaped the draft plan structure, content, and direction, and these edits continued through the fall. Legal and department reviews were underway in late 2023 and early 24 to finalize the public draft version, and the plan was released to the public on March 4th for a 30-day public comment period. We held 2 events for public comment, including an online meeting and an in-person meeting held in Burns. Each included a short presentation followed by opportunities for questions and public comment. After the 30-day period, we received 10 comments, which you can review in Appendix B of your packet, and there's a brief summary in the agenda item in your packet as well. Following revisions and designs, we're now presenting the final version here today. Next slide, please. And this slide is really just highlighting how this plan is different from the prior plan. The 2024 Asset Management Plan has increased emphasis on climate change, environmental markets, renewable energy, and wildfire resiliency. The 2012 plan had a focus on selling low-performing lands. This new plan is looking at other management opportunities to increase performance on school lands retained by the department. So it's basically, what can we do better with what we have? The new plan adds 4 new land classifications specific to department programs to better define what lands are and are not covered in this plan and to help with department reporting. This new plan covers 681,000 acres of school land assets managed by the Real Property Program and by Amber here. Other department programs manage an additional 93,000 acres. And that includes, the most of those is the Elliott, bless you, and also the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve, all of which are statutorily dedicated lands and mostly covered by other management plans. Next slide, please. So the guiding principles and considerations behind this plan, the section of the plan defines principles which include how the plan is advancing the department's strategic plan, promotes climate resiliency, and gives attention to environmental justice communities. The section also defines school lands. The land managed by this asset management plan are 96% constitutional lands the state received in its Admission Act for the use of schools back in 1859. The remaining 4% of the lands under this plan are statutory lands managed by the Real Property Program. Together, these lands, the constitutional and the very small amount of statutory lands, are the department's school lands. So we refer to them as school lands. And the photo on this slide is of Crump Lake, which is one of the larger blocks of statutory lands, part of which was granted to the state through the Swamp Land Act of 1860. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to hand it off to Amber McKernan, the Real Property Manager, to go a little bit more into the details of the report. All yours, Amber.
Can we go to the next slide? Okay, thank you, Governor Kotek, Secretary Griffin-Blade, Treasurer Reed. My name is Amber McKernan, and I'm the manager of the Real Property Program for the Department of State Lands. Let's see. This map shows the former land classifications of 681,000 acres of school lands covered by this asset management plan. Land classifications comprise the largest section of the asset management plan. The department uses land classifications to track the land by its usage, resources, and income. Currently, the Real Property Program manages 6 classifications of land, including agriculture, forest lands, industrial, commercial, residential, or ICR, mineral and energy resources, rangelands, and special stewardship. Next slide, please. With the adoption of the new plan, a 7th classification of renewable energy is added to cover lands converted to solar, wind, geothermal, or energy storage management. We do not yet have any lands wholly converted to renewable energy, but we have several active projects. For each land classification, the plan details an overview, land characteristics, management requirements, performance expectations, and opportunity considerations. Opportunity considerations list alternative or additional management scenarios. These opportunities include newer markets, including carbon credits, conservation easements, mitigation banking, and other options that could be initiated on school lands for revenue generation. Next slide, please. So moving into the action areas section of the plan, there are 12 action areas which can be thought of as the goals of the asset management plan. These action areas are subdivided into 3 categories: increasing management opportunities, using land transactions to benefit management, and increasing efficiency in management. We do not have time to go through all of the action areas, but I will cover some highlights. Next slide, please. One action area discusses opportunities in environmental markets. This action area seeks new opportunities within climate policies, carbon markets, conservation easements, and mitigation banking. This area may include leasing land out for carbon sequestration developments, such as direct air capture plants. Many of our special stewardship lands exhibit sensitive plants or other resources that prevent traditional activities, such as grazing or timber management. Grants, easements, and other environmental protection markets may offer funding to benefit the Common School Fund, yet allow continued protection of the conservation values of the property. As renewable energy projects expand across Oregon, many of these developments require habitat mitigation. The department is engaging with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and land developers to find lands that may serve as long-term mitigation sites. A habitat mitigation contract allows some existing land uses, such as grazing, to continue. This creates layered revenue opportunities. The contract would provide for annual revenue for serving as a mitigation site and would deliver additional funding to complete required habitat improvements. Next slide, please. Another action area discusses opportunities in renewable energy. This action area is intended to develop ideal properties for renewable energy leases. Once developed, these leases have the potential to produce significant revenue for up to 40 years. These projects also help to meet Oregon's goals for clean energy production. We are preparing a renewable energy analysis of our school lands. Early results show that over 50,000 acres of school lands may have attributes desirable for renewable energy development. Currently, the Real Property Program has entered into 3 solar leases, all of which are nearing the end of their demonstration phase and moving towards development in the next 2 to 4 years. There are active negotiations on 2 further applications, one of which could be 10,000 acres in size. Next slide, please. Another action area focuses on expanding our partnership work. So this action area is focusing on expanding our use of partnerships in our land management. This morning, we were able to honor the many partners we work with to accomplish landscape level projects on department rangelands. These projects allow our partners to apply for grants to complete work on department lands. Many partnership projects focus on habitat improvement. These activities often involve juniper cutting, weed treatments, grass seeding work, and other improvements that increase habitat quality. Projects are aimed at reducing fuel loads and wildfire risks. These improvements also benefit greater sage-grouse habitat in addition to other wildlife. This slide shows some of the partnership projects in action with examples of juniper cutting and burning, aerial herbicide applications to control annual invasive grasses, and prescribed fire efforts. Next slide, please. There are 2 action areas on this slide regarding forest land management. The forest lands classifications is divided into DSL managed forest lands and Oregon Department of Forestry managed forest lands. As identified in this action area, the Real Property Program is focusing on increasing active management of our DSL managed forest lands. We've been engaged in a number of projects which are prepared and managed by department staff and have improved forest health and wildfire resilience while also earning financial returns. The second forest lands action area involves the transfer of certain Oregon Department of Forestry managed forest lands back to DSL management. By using this process, all forest lands east of the Cascade Range are now DSL managed. There are other properties in the southwest part of the state where forest productivity is lower that may be future suitable candidates for transfers from the Department of Forestry back to DSL management. Next slide, please. The final section of the plan covers measuring success. This portion of the plan defines performance measures, including gross annual revenue and net operating income. It discusses the removal of return on asset value as a performance measure, which is not proven to be a valuable metric as it's based on appraised land values. Regularly appraising all land assets is a large expense, and without significant increases in lease rates, the measure of success never increased. The 2012 Asset Management Plan acknowledged that return on asset value may not be an appropriate metric for long-term land management success. This section also discusses outcomes as a measurement of success. Outcomes may include climate resilience, environmental benefits, benefits to state and local economies, and reducing wildfire risk for department lands and our neighbors. Other outcomes such as meeting community needs for housing and industrial lands are also discussed. Next slide, please. In recognition of the governor's initiatives on housing, we wanted to touch on the opportunities for housing on school lands. The Real Property Program has evaluated all current school lands for housing opportunities, but the majority of our ownership is very remote and not suitable for housing development. We have a small number of ICR properties that are suitable for housing development. The Stevens Road tract in Bend is an example of an ICR property that underwent land use planning to be added into the city's urban growth boundary. The property is being sold in 2 phases, with the first phase sold in 2020 and the second phase set to close in 2025. The first phase was added to Bend's urban growth boundary through the normal urban growth boundary expansion process, whereas the second phase was added as a result of House Bill 3318 of the 2021 session and designated 20 acres of deed-restricted, affordable, and educator housing. Once both phases are fully developed, there will be more than 4,000 housing units added to the city of Bend. And I would like to add that the first phase is already selling homes as part of a master plan community. While these opportunities are limited, the asset management plan does identify acquiring ICR properties suitable for land use planning as an action area. One opportunity for acquisitions is through our in lieu selections still owed to us from the federal government. There is currently an 80-acre parcel in La Pines urban growth boundary that the department is set to acquire in 2025. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Deputy Director Ryan.
Thank you, Amber. Ted, can I get to the summary slide, please? Thank you. So in summary, we want to emphasize that our goal with this new plan is to increase revenue generation by expanding our land management opportunities. There are many new markets in land management, which the department is actively learning about and evaluating for revenue generation. We're especially excited about carbon markets and mitigation options where development is restricted. Efforts to mitigate climate change and increase wildfire resiliency on our landscape are integral to maintaining our land base and meeting our stewardship responsibilities, which is core to our mission. Next slide, please. And so in the interest of time, we'll wrap up here. If approved, this plan would be effective on December 1st. I'd like to end by recognizing the entire Real Property team for their hard work and dedication in leading this plan development and managing our school lands assets. Several of them actually traveled here and over there in the audience. So really good to see folks from our Bend office. We continue to support one another to deliver DSL's mission, and we are very grateful for the land board's support. And then on a final note, DSL is actually moving into a new agency-wide structure, which puts the Real Property Program under a third deputy. And so Chris Castelli is now, effective September 1st, managing the land management division, and I will manage the aquatic resource management division. So splitting that operations deputy into 2 positions, which will really help each of the new deputies to dive more into details and to advance policy objectives within those 2 programs. So I'm excited for that change, but I will miss working with Amber and her crew. And it's been a real honor and pleasure to manage the Real Property Program for these many years. So with that, I'll close up and we're open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. That was a very helpful presentation. Any questions?
2 quick
Mr. Treasurer.
I know we're on a clock, so I'll try to be quick with both of them. One, with regard to the question around renewable energy and removing lands from other uses, I wonder if I'm misguided in my thinking that there are probably places where it's not a binary choice, where it's not either or. And I wonder if that's accounted for here. Certainly adding renewable energy leases would be good when it makes sense, but there may be places where it doesn't mean removing the use for other purposes. Could you correct my thinking if that is appropriate, please?
Yes, Treasurer Reed, members of the board, that's absolutely true. I mean, what we are looking for, and Amber mentioned this, we're looking for layered opportunities to manage and generate revenue from different ways on the same pieces of property where that's appropriate. There are, for example, for solar developments, there is opportunity to do grazing or agriculture underneath the solar panels. For wind energy, same deal with grazing. But there are other constraints like sage grouse conservation requirements where wind energy development probably is not appropriate in those areas. So we would look for the appropriate layering of the different uses in order to generate revenue.
Different question, different topic. The idea of transitioning from asset value to net operating income makes sense to me, but I couldn't help but thinking about the way these sorts of measures play out in our treasury in the investment world. It would be possible, for example, to maximize net operating income in a given year, but it would come at the expense of operating income in the future year. So I wonder if you could help me and maybe others understand how the long-term thinking around net operating income is accounted for. Thinking about this over the long term, I hope.
Right. Treasurer Reed, I think the thing to keep in mind is that the type of lands that we have that we're managing for revenue, they're not really investment lands. You know, the department didn't choose these lands and decide between this property or that property, and that's where that return on investment is really a useful measure. And so we're in the opportunity to increase revenue really is limited for most of these properties because they are a type of property that, you know, they're what's left of the common school lands from the original 4.3 million acres that the state received in 1859. That being said, you know, rangeland, you know, there are rangeland leases, and we're sort of in a middle area in terms of what our lease values are. We charge more than the BLM does, but less than the private market does. So we have sort of a niche there, but we are the lease rates that we charge are set by rules, so we don't really have the opportunity to readily increase revenues there. But I think that we can look at what our past performance has been, and then look at these new management opportunities and compare the revenue of those and the potential revenues if there are multiple alternatives moving forward, and be able to make choices that will result in better returns in the future. Hopefully that answered your question. I'm not sure. I can tell by your face that I didn't nail it.
I fear I may have been too theoretical. I'm just saying I don't think we should be measuring net operating income year over year. We should be looking at longer term averages. So as to account for decisions that are not, let's maximize income in this one year, but that comes at the cost of income over the long term. I'm thinking about greatest permanent value. So I'm just making the point that we should be measuring those over longer terms, not 1 year at a time.
Thank you for that, Treasurer. That's a very good point. And of course, there are fluctuations in expenses as well. Right. Fire protection costs, for example, can be high 1 year and not as high the next. And so you want to average those things out over time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Madam Secretary, any questions, comments?
I appreciate your last comments. It's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. That's great. I do have one kind of unusual question. That last slide that you showed, or is that?
That is a pictograph. Is it the pictograph you're speaking about, Secretary? That's actually in our Stockade block in Malheur County. It's one of the larger blocks of rangelands that we manage. And I don't know where it is on that property, and I don't think I would share. But yeah, that is definitely on school lands.
Okay. I mean, I just have an interest in that, particularly because of Eastern Oregon and where I grew up. There's like, often you see pictographs on Gorge or the John Day River Gorge is what I'm speaking of. So yeah, anyway, it's just very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I do want to call out, even though we didn't go into detail, the increasing the efficiency and management action items. Thumbs up. Another comment, and I think you covered a little bit, Director Walker, and the discussion of some changes coming, but I think this is ambitious in trying some new things and making sure we have the capacity to do that. So spending some money to make some more money, so I just want to put that out there that we should not feel constrained. We should think about that because I think you're talking about some new areas that might take a little bit more capacity within the agency to do. On wildfire. No, and that is a good direction, I think. On wildfire, looking at the map and knowing how many acres have burned, particularly on the east side, I do like the call out on resilience and and all the partnerships that go in places where our land's being managed in a way to help reduce fire, handling fuel on the landscape. Those are difficult things to monetize, but they are so important for us to be good partners out in these communities. So I'm glad that that's in there. Do we know how many acres of the land on our rangeland side that burned this year? Do we know?
Close to 10,000 acres.
10,000 acres. Okay. Yeah, it's been a very long summer.
1,000 maybe in forest as well.
And as well as in forest on the east side. Okay. Thank you for that detail. This is an informational item. Any other questions or comments?
This is an action item.
Oh, excuse me. You're right. This is an action item. Sorry. Got lost track of the agenda there. So I would, Madam Director, would you like to make a recommendation?
Yes. Let me find it. What item are we under?
Item 4.
Item 4. Oh, here we go. The department happily recommends that the land board adopt the proposed 2024 asset management plan to be effective on December 1, 2024.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Treasurer, I'd entertain a motion.
Sure. I move approval of the recommendation and the adoption of the 2024 asset management.
Thank you so much. I have a second.
You do have a second.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We have a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions? Any objections to the motion? Seeing none, motion passes. We now have a new asset management plan. Thank you for the hard work there. Well done.
A forest management plan and an asset management.
This is a plan day. Woo-hoo. And I do appreciate it. I mean, we are a little past time, but I think this has been, very fruitful conversations. The presentations have been, I think, on point all day. So I really appreciate everyone who's been involved. We do have other items. Director Walker, anything for the good of the order that you need to bring up?
No, Governor, I knew this was going to be a long meeting, so even my history lesson is lost today. And we look forward to hosting you in December, where it will be another long meeting, not this long, but we seem to have a lot on our agenda these days.
You're keeping us busy, which we appreciate. So so our next meeting will be December. And so unless there are objections, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for a great meeting.
Thank you. 12:35, not too bad.